Okay, so as it says on page 325, a complex sentence pattern is composed of one independent clause and with one or more subordinate clauses. And this is where you go to B3E to find out what they are. There's actually three types out there. There's an adjective clause, a adverb clause, and a noun clause. So I'm going to briefly cover what the adjective clause and the adverb clauses are. But you don't really need to worry about these ones because they don't require the same kind of punctuation that so when we say subordinate clause, we're talking adverb clause. Okay, so any of these two right here, adverb clauses, okay, punctuation wise. So here it is. Subordinate clauses are pattern-like sentences, so they have subjects and verbs, and sometimes objects and complements, but they function as either adjectives, adverbs, or nouns. Okay, so they can't stand alone as complete sentences, and you'll see that when you read these, when you listen to them aloud. You say them out loud, they make more sense. Okay, so this first one right here, a subordinate clause usually begins with a subordinate conjunction or a relative pronoun. They have a chart at the bottom of this page to show you what those are. So the first one, adjective clauses modify nouns or pronouns, and they usually answer the question which one or what kind of. Most adjective clauses begin with a relative pronoun, so who or whom or whose or which or that. In addition to introducing the clause, this relative pronoun points back to the noun that it modifies, and you can actually see that right here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit so you can actually see that a bit better. There we go. It's a little on the blurry side. There we go. Nope. Okay. So the coach chose players who would benefit from intense drills. So who is our subject here and would benefit is our verbs, but it's referring back to the players, because if we could say the coach chose players, but we'd be like, which players? A book that goes unread is a writer's worst nightmare. Now this one you couldn't remove this. This is a relative clause. Both of them are relative clauses, or the relative clauses meaning that they're essential clauses. They're not non-essential. You really can't take them out because the meaning of the sentence becomes vague. I think the word's obtuse, but I don't want to use a word inaccurately. So if you said a book is a writer's worst nightmare, that sentence makes absolutely no sense at all. So that is our subject. Goes unread is our verb. A book that goes unread is a writer's worst nightmare. Right after that, by the way, the next nightmare that writers have is a book that ends up in the bargain bin. So, but eventually they all do. Relative pronouns are sometimes understood. The things we cherish most are the things we might lose. So that is being removed. And the reason they would do that is just to kind of cut down on the wordiness. You could say the things that we cherish most are the things that we might lose. But so the subject here is understood. It's kind of hidden. But honestly, it's just the only reason we get rid of them is just for clarity and for conciseness. And occasionally an adjective clause is introduced by a relative adverb, like when or where or why. The aging actor returned to the stage where he had made his debut as Hamlet half a century earlier. Another relative clause that we need to keep there because it tells us what this stage is. It gives us some clarity. The parts of an adjective clause are also arranged in sentences as subject, verb, object, complement. So sometimes it is our closest friend who disappoints us. There's our object complement right there. Frequently, however, the object or the complement appears first. They can be the very friends whom we disappoint. So it's right there. Okay. It's kind of almost a little bit inverted. The direct object's right here. See, direct object. I don't know why I called it the object complement. Okay, we're gonna just skim over adverb because those are the ones we're most concerned about. I'm gonna move to noun clause. So this is another one that we basically don't need to worry about punctuation. That's the neat thing about these adjective clauses. If you look at them, because they're essential, they're not non-essential. If you remember with non-essential clauses, we would put a comma at the beginning of the who, or we would put it on both sides, like after book and after unread. But we can't take these out. They're essential. So same thing goes with this one. We wouldn't put a comma right here. We wouldn't put a comma right here or here. So we don't need to worry about punctuation with adjective clauses, and we don't need to do it with noun clauses either. They function as single word nouns, so subject, subject complement, direct object, object of the preposition. They usually begin with one of the following words: how, if, that, what, whatever, when, where, whether, which, who, whoever, whomever, whose, and why. There's a complete list, of course, down at the bottom here. Whoever leaves the house last, that's our subject. Okay, whoever being the simple one, but whoever leaves the house last must double lock the door. So must is our double lock is our verb right there. Copernicus argued, that stand by itself, that the sun is the center of the earth, not the earth, excuse me, the center of the universe. So this is our direct object. As you can see, there's no punctuation needed for these. Same as before, we don't need to do this. Subordinating word introducing a clause may or may not play a significant role in the clause. It does in this sentence and this one, but they're going to show you some other ones. They said whoever's the subject of this clause, but that does not perform a function in its clause. So with an adjective clause, the parts of a noun clause may be appearing in normal order, subject, verb, and then the object or the complement, or out of their normal order. Loyalty is what keeps a friendship strong. So what keeps friendship? New Mexico is where we live. So they're out of order there. Okay, and then here's that list. Okay, there's the adjective clauses. There are the noun clauses. Relative pronouns, remember, usually or often, these ones will make it so that you can't change them. You can't pull them out and have the sentence still make sense. Okay, so subordinating conjunctions in adverb clauses is the one we're concerned about. This is the entire list right here. After, although, as if, because, before, even though, if, in order that, once, since, so that, then, that, though, unless, until, when, where, whether, while. I think I listed most of them on your worksheet. I think the ones I listed the most might be the ones that I see the most, but it's been a while since I looked at that sheet. I might have just copied and pasted all of these here. So this is how they talk about them in the book, and then I'm going to kind of explain them a little bit better in the other page that I'm going to show you. So adverb clauses modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs, and they usually answer one of these questions: when, where, why, how, under what conditions, to what degree. They always begin with a subordinating conjunction, so one of those that was listed down below, such as after, although, because, that, though, unless, when. Those are the ones they listed right there, are often the ones that are most commonly used. When the sun went down, the hikers prepared their camp. So the when the sun went down clause answers when they prepared their camp. Katie would have made the team if she hadn't broken her ankle. So under what conditions would Katie have made the team if she hadn't broken her ankle? So you can see some punctuation, at least in the first sentence. You see a comma at the end of that. So I'm going to pop over to the rule that I gleaned from that. So when you have the subordinate, which is sometimes called by your teachers dependent, when you have a dependent or subordinate clause and it precedes the independent clause, you put a comma. When the independent clause precedes the independent clause precedes the dependent or the subordinate clause, no comma is necessary. So I actually have that rule right here. When the dependent clause comes first, comma, a comma is necessary at the end of that clause, period. Okay, how can you tell if a dependent clause it's a dependent clause or subordinate clause? You can actually hear it. When the dependent clause comes first, you're like, yes, go on, Sister Perry. Okay, so no comma is needed when the independent clause comes first. So as you can see right here, no comma is needed. That's our independent clause right there. And when the dependent clause is right there. Okay, same thing goes here. We've got our dependent. When the dependent clause comes first, a comma is necessary at the end of those clauses. So right here. Okay, I don't want to fill this with too much. I don't know why this is highlighted. That's kind of weird. Let's just get rid of that color there. Okay, as I was walking down the street, that's definitely a dependent clause. I met some leprechauns, independent clause. Hope this is making sense. You will get a good grade in Sister Perry's class, independent clause, if you work hard, dependent clause. You could also reverse this and say, if you work hard, you will get a good grade in Sister Perry's class. Okay. And that's true, by the way. If you work hard, you will get a good grade in my class. It's designed to do so, to function that way. Although it was cold outside, I still didn't, that's dependent, I still didn't wear a jacket, independent. The woodchuck decided to chuck some wood because he is a woodchuck. Okay, so the woodchuck decided to chuck some wood, independent. And then because he's a woodchuck, dependent. Now you could reverse this and say because he is a woodchuck, the woodchuck decided to chuck some wood. Okay, this is definitely a sentence that your teacher probably told you. Never start a sentence with because. I've been trying to find the answer or the reason why they say never start with because. I haven't been able to find it yet. I will attempt to find it again, but I doubt I'm going to find the reason why. The only thing I can think of is that when your teacher taught you this, if this is sounding familiar, this pattern of punctuation is sounding familiar, then it's because they would have to teach grade schoolers this concept that once you reach the end of a dependent clause, you need to put a comma there. And that might have been too hard for grade schoolers to grasp. I know we were all very smart, or at least we thought we were as grade schoolers, but some concepts are a little bit more difficult and really don't click until you are an adult. I have no problem with this sentence. I don't know why other people would. I will continue to try to find the answer to that, however. Okay, so I am going to end there. I do have a very bad analogy for this one too, and a video I'd like to show you guys, but I don't know if I can actually show videos here. If somebody's wondering what a woodchuck looks like, I think I will, well, I worry about getting into copyright infringement if I put it up here on this YouTube video. So I'll just show you guys in class this woodchuck video. Maybe I can still show you an image of what a woodchuck looks like though. Because maybe you're not familiar with woodchucks, but they're these little rat-like creatures called woodchucks, not because they chuck some wood. I believe they're called woodchucks because they live in the woods. I believe that's why they're called that. There's also, this one is actually not a woodchuck. This is a rock chuck. Maybe it's a woodchuck. They also have rock chucks, believe it or not. So they have another fancier name. So we call them rock chucks, but they are yellow-bellied marmots. So anyway. So that's the woodchuck chucking some wood. You'll see that later. I hope this makes sense. My suggestion to writing this, as you can see on the sentence worksheet, there are 3 spaces. There's 3 sentences I require here. What I would suggest doing is, because this is like maybe the #1 punctuation error I find, other than the compound sentence, this is the #1. People not putting the commas at the end of dependent clauses, which is really important, guys. And I probably should show you why it's so important. If you don't put that comma there, It means that you're going to read this sentence in one breath, okay? As we were eating, an owl flew overhead. Are you eating an owl? No. As we were eating, or while we were eating, might be a better one. An owl flew overhead. Here's another one where something could be misinterpreted. While I was driving, a bee flew in the window. So while I was driving, a bee flew in the window. Were you driving a bee? No. While I was driving, you're probably driving a truck or a car. While I was driving, a bee flew in the window and nearly caused me to wreck my car. So one of the reasons we want to put the punctuation there is it allows us to take a breath. It helps with the flow, and it clarifies things like these. So as you see, there are, excuse me, there are 3 spaces. What I would suggest doing is doing one clause or one compound sentence where the dependent clause is first, and then the independent clause, and then do another one where the independent clause is first, and then the dependent clause. And then ask yourself, or wait till class, which one you think you might struggle with more, and then do that one again. Practice that one again. Hope this makes sense to you guys. Thank you for your patience. And I hope this, yeah, like I said, I'll see you in class and we'll discuss this.